Broadcasting live from RISKWORLD 2022 at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, it's time for Workplace MVP, brought to you by R3 Continuum, a global leader in helping workplaces thrive during disruptive times. Now, here's your host.
Hi, everyone. Jamie Gassmann here, your host of Workplace MVP, broadcasting from RISKWORLD 2022's Expo Hall in booth R3 Continuum's booth. And with me, I have Dov Gardin from Regeneron. Nice. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Happy to be here.
And tell me a little bit about what Regeneron does.
Sure. Yeah. Regeneron is a pharmaceutical company. We're probably most known for these days for producing RegenCov, which is a therapy for severe COVID cases. And so we've been providing that probably about the last year and a half, and continue to provide it to patients in need.
Wonderful. And so what is your role at the company? What do you do?
Sure. Yeah. I'm responsible for global business resilience. And so that really stretches across all the components related to continuity of operations, from how we detect events into risk management, crisis management, incident management, into business recovery, disaster recovery. So It really runs the gamut of everything we do to make sure that we're as prepared as possible for disruptive events. And when they do inevitably happen, as we all know they do, that we're responding appropriately and minimizing impact to the business.
Yeah, wonderful. So obviously over the last year, over the couple years now, I guess, what did that look like for you in your role?
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting question. I've only been at Regeneron for about a year.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity to see three companies through COVID. Because I was at Allergan, which is a different pharmaceutical company, best known as the makers of Botox and other medical aesthetics products. So I had been there for about 4 or 5 years and put the team together to manage COVID. In the middle of that process, Allergan was acquired by AbbVie. So I spent a year at AbbVie as part of the transition, and then moved out of AbbVie into Regeneron, where I am now. So yeah, really interesting. 3 pharmaceutical companies in 2 years. I want to say 2 of those transitions, I didn't meet my boss at all, which is crazy. I mean, I did virtually, but not in person.
Yeah.
Right? AbbVie never was at the site anyway. I mean, a huge global pharmaceutical company, 3rd largest right now. And really kind of interesting experience to see the different yet related challenges that all 3 companies went through. And I'm actually speaking about that later today.
Interesting. So speaking of you speaking,
right.
Talk to me a little bit about that presentation. What is it titled, and what are you going to be the content of it? Like, what are you going to be talking about? Sure.
Yeah. So we'll be in the thought leader theater. The focus is really when work from home is not an option in the pharmaceutical, with a focus on pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. And it's really, heavily focused on the surprises that we encountered when trying to manage through this very unique, very globally disruptive event. Things that surprised us, as prepared as you think you are, what didn't work well and why. And then we'll present a couple of things that you can do to overcome or avoid the kinds of surprises that we saw.
Yeah. Amazing. Because I'm sure, would you say that some of the things you might be talking about, is it applicable to other maybe disruptions too, or is it strictly just more around the pandemic?
It is. So the lessons learned are really very much about how to prepare for and manage a crisis in general, any kind of crisis. And I mean, when you think about disruptive events, right, you guys are 3, you work with companies supporting how you get through disruption. There are always challenges and surprises. Business as usual is simple, right? It doesn't mean it's not hard. It means that we know what we're doing. We know how the business is supposed to operate. But once you're confronted with a chaotic, stressful, disruptive situation, a lot of what you had planned for, a lot of the ways of working used to go out the window. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about in that session that we'll be providing is, yes, it's using COVID as sort of context, but there are lessons that could be applied in should be applied in any disruption.
Yeah, because, it's inevitable that a disruption is going to happen. So having that, a preparedness plan, knowing how you're going to respond to it, how you're going to support your people, all those things matter, especially when you get into that moment.
Yeah, and how leadership teams make decisions
Yeah.
and come together to focus on the right thing and not what, they may, based on their functional expertise, think is the most important. It's interesting. A lot of it has to do with combating cognitive bias, which is a common theme in risk, of course. It's probably one of the number one issues with objectively understanding risk. But that applies to disruptive situations, crises, et cetera, as well.
Yeah, very interesting. So if there were 3 takeaways or 3 key points you want your audience to be left with when they walk away from your presentation, what would those be?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the first is to recognize that you're not going to have all the answers. There are going to be surprises, right? Don't go into it thinking, oh yeah, we've been through pandemics before. To use COVID as an example, we've been through supply disruptions before. There will likely be specifics of that event that you did not plan for, you couldn't have planned for, and anticipate surprises, which is a little bit of a weird thing to say, but I think what it means is go into the situation with an open mind, right? Number 2 is you need to apply an appropriate crisis management decision-making framework, right? Where you've got the right people in the room. So that's number 1. Number 2, everyone agrees on what the problem is. What is the problem statement for the business? What are we focusing on? And then once you have that, you can then get into solutioning or coming up with your strategies. I think senior leaders especially like to make quick decisions, solve problems very quickly without maybe having the best understanding of the problem or having agreement across a leadership team on what the problem is. So I'd say that's number 2. And I think number 3 is be open to being flexible. That's what really allows you to be resilient. And by resilient, I mean not just surviving, but thriving, coming out of that event even stronger than you were before.
Yeah, great. I'm sure it sounds like a great presentation. I'm sure the audience is really going to appreciate the content and knowledge and information you're sharing.
I hope so. And it's 10 feet away from this booth.
I know.
So you can hold the mic up if you want to hear it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk
Likewise,
with you. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you and hear a little bit more, maybe ask you questions about your presentation or, just connect, how would they do that?
LinkedIn is the best way. So Dov, spelled D-O-V, Gardin, G-A-R-D-I-N. Just LinkedIn, mention that you heard the podcast. And I'm always happy to connect with people to talk and kind of share insights and experiences.
Wonderful. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Good luck at your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Workplace MVP. R3 Continuum is a proud sponsor of this show and is delighted to celebrate most valuable professionals who work diligently to secure safe workplaces where employees can thrive.